Left in Kentucky, the podcast of indivisible Northern Kentucky. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Left in
Hey, we're back.
Hey Amy.
Oh, and Chewbacca, just in time.
And Chewbacca's welcoming us back too. Oh, so much fun, so much snow. Oh my God.
You know, and this is our first episode after the end of the impeachment trial. So, you know, we can act shocked about how our senators voted.
The impeachment trial? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, 2.0.
I hadn't heard anything about that. Was that on the news?
I know you're not paying any attention, obviously. To be fair, I listened to less of it than I did the last one.
Yeah, I mean, it was important I understand getting the stuff into the historical record and whatnot. I get that. And I agree that that's important. But we all knew that the Republicans we were never going to get enough Republicans to grow a spine in time to actually convict them. So
I feel like they're like the trifecta of the whole Wizard of Oz thing. They have no courage. They have no heart. And they definitely have no brain.
Nice.
I feel like Dorothy over here, you know?
Is it just me? Am I taking crazy pills? Oh, yeah.
You have some of those crazy pills, Roberto?
Yeah. Hogging all the crazy pills.
My kids just throw them out like candy to the wind.
Nice. Well, that explains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a little bit of snow last week too.
A little bit.
Yep. We got, about 10 inches of snow, and they're calling for another 10 inches tomorrow. So Monday. So we're looking forward to that. Of course, we record on Sundays. I think everybody knows that by now. So when you're listening to this, it will be the future Tuesday.
The future.
So by then, Snowpocalypse Part 2 will have hit. So you're not going to have anything to do Tuesday because you're going to be snowed in. So you might as well listen to us and share the podcast.
That's right. And I'm going to not leave home as usual. So nothing will change for me at all.
It's like the credit card commercial, don't leave home without it. Amy, don't leave home.
Yeah. Well, I just don't have any desire to. It has to be a very good reason for me to do so.
Yep. So let's see.
This is our first post impeachment 2.0. Yeah. I'm glad it's over. Honestly, I'm glad they finished it up in a timely manner because we've got work.
Yes.
And
we have work to do, and we need to get on it, and I think that's important. So, not to mention, I'm really tired of hearing about the Orange Menace. So,
right. If I never had to hear that name, again, which that's not going to happen. I know, Yep. And I'm just wondering, which way is it going to go, Roberto? Do you think it's going to be like, Trump's just going to be sort of like, 2020, and we had Trump, and then we had 2020, and then we just, it's different now, or whatever. Or is it going to be like the Trump flags will be put up next to the Nazi flags and the Confederate flags? Will it just be like the trifecta of that?
I don't know. I'm still seeing those flags out and about. So,
right before the election, and I live on 42, so. Traffic, and it's Boone County traffic, so you can, what that means. And so there was a plethora of big trucks spewing coal, flying their Trump flags, sometimes with the Confederate flags. And let me tell you, I have seen zero. Have not seen it. So
that's good.
I've seen a little bit better.
I've seen a lot of them come down, but but I still see quite
Of course, I don't go anywhere. So this is just the people that go by my house. Maybe they put their flags away before they come by my house, and then they put them out again. I don't know.
That's what it is. Definitely.
That's got to be what it is.
So anyway, I think we can dive into our favorite segment, our cow patties for this week. Since yours is somewhat related to the impeachment 2.0, why don't you go first, Miss Amy?
Okay. Well, it's related to the General Assembly in Kentucky. So,
I'm sorry.
They're stupid, just like the Republicans in the Senate. So, in that way, it's related. More and more, it seems like it's more about which team you're on and what kind of hype you can get versus actually getting things done for people. So, in that vein, I am giving Kentucky's GOP generally assembled members their cow patty for this. If you even take a glance at some of the bills that have passed this session, you can see kind of a theme going on. They're attacking the governor, and they're starting to give the Snowmageddon. We're getting a little bit of a run for their money by the amount of snowflakes I'm hearing and seeing, because this is a lot to do with masks and rules to keep people safe, and this is what they're spending their time doing. And we know there's an end to this pandemic. These rules aren't going to be around forever, so why not do something lasting for the people of Kentucky that can actually help them? It's just so frustrating to see them take their supermajority and just not do anything good with it.
Yeah,
it's very frustrating.
They seem to spend a lot of time working, creating solutions for problems that don't exist, and ignoring creating solutions for the problems that we do have.
We do have some, guys. We really do. So yeah, plop to them.
Well, that's a well-deserved cow patty, definitely. And anyway, so moving on to my cow patty this week. This past week, in the Kentucky General Assembly, in the one of the committee meetings, the junior senator from the state of Kentucky, known as Rand Paul, for some reason was called to testify. And for his testimony, comparing the insurrection in Washington, D.C. to the Black Lives Matter protest for Breonna Taylor in Louisville, I proudly give him a cow patty.
Deserved. Well, that one really stinks, Roberto. I've seen some cow patties in my time, but that one's a stinky one for sure.
Yeah, it was really, really bizarre. First off, the committee was talking about election reforms.
Okay.
And for some reason, he was brought in to testify about election reforms. Not quite sure why that would happen on the state level. You'd bring in a federal senator, but anyway.
Maybe it was from that Putin meeting. Maybe he got some tips there.
Yeah. And what he said was, and I am quoting here, "Frankly, I think the violence of January 6th was abhorrent. But there was also violence all throughout the summer that many of the Democrat side did not criticize the violence or tried to stop the violence in our cities. We had violence in Louisville, frankly." He then went on to add, "There's been violence on both sides, and extremists on both sides ought to be condemned."
Yeah. Sounds right. Sounding like something he would say.
Yeah, so the most of the demonstrations in Louisville were mostly peaceful, except for, when maybe the police shot and killed somebody.
Right. They're not going to peacefully take that. Nobody's going to peacefully take that. Come on.
Yeah. And they weren't, they didn't attempt to overthrow an election, overthrow an elected official,
kill the Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Hang the Vice President.
Yeah. They didn't go to Frankfurt. They didn't drive to Frankfurt and storm the Capitol.
Right.
So I'm just really,
what occurred to me, Roberto, Antifa, right?
Yeah.
I know how we can get rid of Antifa. People need to stop being fascists. Then there'd be no reason for it.
I think that is the best way to do it. Yeah.
So let's get rid of Antifa.
I was just really gobsmacked about this. And Charles Booker had a really good tweet about it. He said, today Rand Paul compared a domestic terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol to overthrow democracy with Kentuckians marching for justice after Breonna Taylor was killed in her home by police. He must think the Birmingham church bombing and the Greensboro sit-ins were the same too.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah. The continued false equivalency that we see coming out of Republicans is staggering and sickening.
And it used to be that they would try to couch it, walk the line. Not anymore. They just lie. They don't care.
Yeah, it's really, I find myself really struggling to find the words to voice my disgust at it. And I long for a day. I long for a day when we can get back to where we have elected officials who are willing to hold people accountable when they need to be accountable, no matter what party they're in.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that it's always been perfect, but going back to Watergate, you saw Republicans that were willing to hold the president, Richard Nixon, accountable for breaking the law.
Right. And how much worse is this insurrection and this stuff? Yeah. I mean, Watergate seems like a tea party, with, dessert.
Yeah.
Compared to this. I just remember feeling it so viscerally as I watched it that day. I mean, and of course I only saw a fraction of what was really going on, a small fraction, Can you imagine those staffers and, even the janitorial staff or whoever in that building being stormed? I mean, we've all seen the videos. It's just like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And they want to just brush it under the rug like, and hopefully the former president will be held accountable through a court of law. Hopefully. But that's not something I can do or you can do.
Yep.
So we need to do the business that we can do and be the influence that we can be, because that's just going to be what it is.
Yep.
I'm done being mad about it. It makes me very sad. I'll never forget it, but I've got other things to be mad about right now.
Joining us now is Ryan Salzman, who's a political science professor at Northern Kentucky University, as well as a political analyst on a number of media outlets, at least here in the Northern Kentucky area. So welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
We appreciate you being here as always, enjoying, in between snowstorms this week.
Yeah, y'all can't see me. Y'all can almost hear me shaking my head that hard, probably through the podcast. My children may come bounding in a moment, but that won't be snow related today. But it will be for the rest of the week.
Nice.
Oh, mine was out sledding down Ryle Hill already for hours today.
Excellent. So we're into the second part of the 2021 General Assembly session, and which again is the short session, the 30-day session. So we've only got really a couple more weeks to go before the session wraps up. What do you see coming out of Frankfurt that you think is particularly interesting or kind of catches your eye?
Well, it's interesting that after a couple of years with the Republicans taking such strong control a couple of years ago, I feel like we're finally sort of in a rhythm when it comes to a General Assembly. It's good, bad, or otherwise, you kind of expect there now to be this barrage of bills early, in the session. At first, it seemed like that was because there was the changing of the guard a couple of years ago, but now it seems more and more that that's just kind of their process for governing, and maybe that'll go away. But I'm suspicious that this will be a new reality from here on moving forward. And then if the Democrats take control back, it probably will remain the norm. And it does, kind of beg the question, why would you waste a week to begin with? They hold all of these off-session committee meetings, and they, prepare a lot of this legislation back in, July through December. So why not get to work this year? Those policies were around limiting the governor, but a lot of them that they passed in the first week didn't have a whole lot to do with limiting the governor. They may have been kind of pandemic adjacent, I guess you could say. But, for instance, like SB 5, that's about limiting liabilities. That's certainly the pandemic is a motivator for it, but I think it probably would have happened anyway. Single digit bills, we often say like single digit bills, they're going to get through quickly. So it was a lot out of the chute, especially since it's a budget session. I have to keep reminding myself that this is a budget session as well, because normally this wouldn't be a budget session this year. Right. They punted last year. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do, considering that last year, it was right around this time last year that Rachel Roberts was elected, and a week or two later was sworn in, and at the exact same time, the world shut down. And so I think I appreciated them saying, let's just do a 1-year budget and then come back next year to do it. The only problem, of course, is that it's just a 30-day session, and you're still trying to create that. So really what, when I think about the General Assembly, this session, the first thing that often comes to mind is, where's the budget? We're going to have to see it. And I know that the budget's never as quick to come, even in a budget year. That's what we say. But because there's so few days, because we're halfway through this session, it does make me wonder. And it also makes me survey the field of how these other pieces of legislation are being brought, debated, nuanced, amended, and then passing or not passing. And so many pieces of legislation seem to be, and I'm sure there are plenty that are going through the normal process, but kind of the bigger ones are coming out hot. I mean, they're coming out hot. They're being filed and debated, referred to committee and passed out of committee the same day. And they're not being shared around. It doesn't seem like, and I say I should be clear that my perspective is largely from talking to people who are professionals down in Frankfurt. And this is what they're telling me, is that these things are coming out hot and you almost have no indication about what's going to be in them. And so you got to think about the budget. For me, I'm really, really interested in this elections bill. But here's another example of one that's coming out hot. Friday was supposed to be the last day to file the bill. We didn't get the bill. We did get Rand Paul violating all understandings of federalism, coming down, telling us about our statutes when he doesn't understand them by his testimony. It appears he knows what's going on in Michigan and Wisconsin, but whether or not he knows what's going on in Kentucky, I think that's highly debatable when it comes to elections. And that may sound harsh, but he's the one that
I think it's accurate.
Get himself
you got it.
Get himself in front of that. And I mean, the messages I was receiving while he was testifying were just like mouth agape, kind of like first of all, why is he here? Secondly, what is he saying?
Right.
And thirdly, who approved this? You know, who thought this was a good idea? You know, Senator McConnell has always had a very, very separation between, because he doesn't want to come in and tell us what to do in Kentucky, because he doesn't want Kentucky coming up and telling him what to do in the United States Senate. You know, he doesn't want Damon Thayer or Andy Beshear or whatever telling him what he should be doing up there in the Senate. Rand Paul clearly doesn't have the same norms that Senator McConnell has. But back to the elections bill, you know, first of all, it probably would have been good to have the Secretary of State testify about these things, right? I mean, you would think that would be.
What would the Secretary of State know about?
I know.
You're throwing logic out there.
I know. No, maybe the junior senator from the Commonwealth isn't who you needed to have testify. And my understanding is, of course, the Secretary Adams, you know, probably will testify. But I've gotten an indication that what we're going to see with this elections bill is it being filed potentially on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, which would be the 16th. And that they cannot debate, you know, they can't even bring it to a committee until it's officially been filed. Right. And so it'll be filed, and they'll potentially have to do their committee hearings after the session adjourns. Now, that's all up in the air, including whether or not the filing deadline is going to be pushed because of the weather. I know that they've bumped back. I think already they've decided to postpone Tuesday to Wednesday. And
it's going to be ugly out there.
It's not going to be pretty. Our snow will be the best case scenario. Those other areas that are getting ice, we really should continue thinking about. I have a lot of family back in Texas still, and it's pretty scary stuff.
Yep.
Well, it's worth postponing. But what does this process look like? That you file a bill on the very last day, you have a session, and then you adjourn session to go have a committee hearing to pass it out on the same day. All of that being said, if what's in it is good, me personally, I don't care how they do it. You know, I mean, that's me. I'm surprise, I'm self-interested. What I have heard about the elections bills, it's going to have some good stuff in it if you're a proponent of expanding access to the polls.
We are.
Good.
And you're right. You're like, yes, that's me. I'm into that. I'm into that. Again, we won't know until we see it. We didn't even get any indications. This is another thing we heard down in Frankfurt, that in years past, when these kinds of pieces of legislation, these bills have come up, they at least give you like the PowerPoint,
right?
You know, bullet pointed kind of, here's what's going to be in the bill. They didn't even try that. This was basically a dog and pony show for Rand Paul, I guess, you know. And I mean, there were some very pointed questions by a lot of Republicans and Democrats of the senator, but what those questions demonstrated is that nobody knows what's going to be in this bill so far. They have ideas. What we're hoping for is that there will be some kind of early voting. I think that's the biggest win, is that there will be some kind of early voting. Probably will not be more than 2 weekends out, might even be up until the weekend prior. I know that there's strong support by the Secretary of State for at least one of those to be a Saturday. So, you know, they're going to have to balance and say, is it worth having early voting through the weekend prior to the election with the other election wrangling that they have to do, you know, in preparation for that? Or the clerks, is this going to be really, really laborious for the clerks, or would they push it back a week, but make sure you have a Saturday? So I know a Saturday is supposed to be in that. What I've heard is some like 3 or 4 days of early voting, including a Saturday. I think that'd be huge. I think that'd be absolutely huge for the Commonwealth to have any kind of early voting. Other things they're talking about doing, you know, having kind of institutionalizing these kind of mega voting centers. The clerks really liked them. They do have a lot of complications, particularly up here in Northern Kentucky, because we have so many jurisdictions that you have a tremendous, like well over 100 individual ballots because of councils. Yes. And so that can be really complicated, because you got to have a really good printer to like literally pump out ballots that are specific to that person. But again, the clerks seem to really like this. I sit on the Get Out the Vote task force with the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and have been in long conversations about a lot of this, including with the clerks from our 3 counties up here and kind of the urban core-ish. Can I say real Northern Kentucky? That's not right. That's not fair. So not really. Boone Campbell, but was on a call with those three clerks, was on a call with the Secretary of State last week. They really liked the big voting centers, but of course there's going to be a concern about a trade-off if it's those in lieu of precincts. So again, this is where we just don't know how, what that would be. And also, will there be any money to go along with this? Because, it might be helpful in a lot of ways, but it's not helpful if you're having to create something with the same amount of dollars. So those are the things I'm looking at.
Wait, are you suggesting that our state legislature might pass something and not fund it?
No way.
I would never. Yes, that's actually exactly what I'm saying.
They have never done that before.
That is non-party specific. That is a favorite thing.
They all do that.
Unfunded mandates are a favorite thing with legislatures, and and I sympathize a lot with our clerks. They're certainly on the ground, and that's the dollars to performance is very clear when it comes to elections.
Yeah.
The good news, one good bit of news to come out of that conversation with the clerks was that they were very impressed with the amount of volunteerism, very impressed with the age groups, that they thought that they were going to be truly up the creek, and they were not. And so that was very encouraging. And as somebody who studies politics, usually the best indicator that somebody's going to do something is if they've already done it before.
Right.
So you get somebody who volunteers this time, and maybe the pandemic was the reason, but there's a much higher likelihood to show up and do it again, and you just kind of create these new cultural norms for being younger, being different groups that you wouldn't normally get to volunteer. So hopefully that's all really, really positive. The clerks really deserve a lot of commendation for being able to handle this election and the primary the way that they did. So that's one that I have a lot of vested interest in, and as a political scientist, I've just wildly interested in. You couldn't believe when I moved to Kentucky that it was almost a decade ago now that there was zero. Or I thought that my home state of Texas was. It did. Surely you can't be more backwards than that.
Yeah.
So,
the early voting is really a game changer. I mean, that's a really great way to enfranchise a lot of people a lot of hourly employees, a lot of warehouse workers, shift workers, who's just really impossible for them to make it in that 6 to 7 window. They've got to get to work, they got to get their kids. So even if it's just 4 days and it includes a Saturday, that is going to be a major improvement in opening up voting to more people.
And I think we all know that once you establish it, expanding it, tweaking it, all of that's a lot easier once it's established. I think it would still require, I'm pretty sure that it's going to require like setting institutionally what those days are. But again, adding and saying, well, it's 4 days and it's Saturday, but then all the clerks, after 2, 3, 4, 10 elections are like, this Saturday voting is great, but we got these crazy lines. Can we open it up the previous Saturdays? Okay, well, let's add one more day. We'll do 2 Saturdays, and then the 4 days, 3 days. In fact, maybe you take off a day, right? You say, hey, it's 4 days Saturday. Well, let's make it 3, but let's have a previous Saturday on that. It's always going to be easier to tweak once something has been passed than trying to establish it like we are now.
And people have already experienced it. We've done a lot of things that you're talking about already for the pandemic. So people know they like it. So there'll be less pushback for sure. Yeah,
it appears that, it has a really high hurdle to clear in the Senate. It's the House has a lot more support. The Senate, it's kind of the classic arguments against, that range from the more logistical, like we don't want people making up their minds and voting 6 weeks before an election when a lot can happen in those last 6 weeks. That one I kind of get, that sort of makes sense. And then there's the whole, well, if you can't make time to vote on election day, then you clearly don't care. And that's the one that just drives me off the wall. That's totally inappropriate, but we're going to see it all. I mean, that latter one I just said, you won't see a lot of that, but that I guarantee you, I've heard people on both sides of the aisle saying that kind of idiotic stuff. But regardless, if it can be overcome, and historic horse racing showed us that bipartisanship in the face of conservative opposition, right? It wasn't partisanship like things being passed unanimously. This was something that there was significant opposition to, and yet it passed through. So elections, I'm really, really interested in. Budget, I'm really interested in. Always curious if they're going to do something with infrastructure. I'm a city councilman in Bellevue. We need help with our roads, and that can manifest in a lot of different ways. A standalone infrastructure bill, changing the road funding formula, increasing the gas tax. These are all would be very different issues, but nonetheless, that would be really important. So I know I look to that a lot as being an important bill. And then I'm also really involved in early childhood education, and of course, that's going to be front and center. Everything from the craziness to me, the fact that early childhood professionals still can't get their vaccines. Who was making that decision? I have no idea. I mean, there is no, more, short of nurses, there is no more frontline. In fact, for our economy, there is no more frontline than early childhood professionals and childcare centers. And yet, they're not getting in at all. And I know people who work in many different parts of the government and do things that are a lot less significant than that. So that one's just truly a head scratcher for me. Everything from that, how the CARES Act funding is being distributed to childcare providers to try to keep that industry afloat. And then there's a couple other interesting bills going through, some around zoning for what we call family childcare centers, which are, you can have an in-home center where you can have up to six or seven non-related children paying you for this service, but they're in neighborhoods, they're in your home, and they're trying to work on increasing or making it easier to establish those kinds of things. So there's a lot of early childhood stuff I'm keeping an eye on as well. So, and then there's pensions, and then there's, again, budget. I work at a university. Curious to see what comes out in the budget. So there's a lot going on, and it's really kind of crazy to think there's only about 15 days plus Sendai left on that.
Yeah. Do you think, so on the budget, I mean, I've heard rumors that the Republicans who are in the supermajority, obviously, that they've been working on a budget behind closed doors, and they're basically going in the last couple of days, they're going to roll out this budget and just hammer it through.
Yes, I think that's to be expected. I think they were doing that anyway, and what's been kind of trying to read between the lines, and I don't know exactly how to read this. Is this Greek or Latin? But there's no indication that there are a lot of meetings. I mean, the report I read from this past week said, we know that they met once. Like, once? Once, and that could mean a couple things. That could mean that they're truly just kind of pushing it, and going to wait and then have these frantic all-nighters where they figure it out, or there's general agreement among them about what this budget's going to look like. And again, they may be going off of last year and just saying, all we got to do is get to next year. We're just going to kind of hold spending steady. It seems like the revenues are in pretty good shape. So, I would think part of the purpose of punting to this year was to, in case revenues really went in the toilet, and you could,
which was what everybody was afraid of last year when the economy started shutting down. They were terrified that our income was just going to go through the floor.
And we should have been worried about that. And that's where I think it's smart to not take that biennium budget, that 2-year budget, and just say, we're just going to ride with it, no matter what happens. Again, would it have been better to, and I don't know if they can, to be honest, I don't know what the process is, but could they have called a special session if the revenues were that bad, and just said, well, we're going to tweak it then, and just know the pain's coming, right? I mean, like if they called it, then you knew it's going to be bad. I always worry that when you open it up, there's just, the opportunity for pet causes to come into play, that, you fought hard against them, for them during a budget session, and now you're going to have to do it again. And if you don't, because of the nature of the pandemic, you're not able to lobby as effectively as a citizen advocate. You're not able to lobby. I don't mean registered lobbyists. They seem to be getting plenty of access. But a citizen advocate, I know, shocking. And I mean, honestly, I'm fine with the system we have. But yeah, so we'll see. I think we'll know more by the end of this week. But honestly, that's what I thought last Friday before I realized that, old man winter was and that groundhog, you want to talk about right. There's right. And then there's right.
We've been talking on our last several episodes. We've been talking about how important it is to contact your legislators. And even though it's much more difficult this year because we can't be there in person and obviously we're, our group's very activist focused, and we're down there almost every legislative session, at least half the time. So we've really been, trying to encourage folks to, call their legislators and, email them is okay. Calling them's great. You really want to shock them, handwrite a letter and mail it. And so I guess I'd be interested from a political analyst point of view. What do you think is the best way to really engage with your representatives in our COVID environment?
I mean, you hit the high points, and those, to be clear, those are good anytime, is to write letters and direct contacts as much as possible. This is not going to be very satisfying, but the best way would have been to contact him back in November when we knew that these things were coming and didn't have it. It's kind of, I love the saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And that gets to your point of reaching out. If you can try to coordinate, just to add on, because you took all the good things, Roberto. You took the things that everybody should be expecting to do all the time. But if you could coordinate, I'd be really interested if you could get a half dozen friends and say, we're going to craft our message very similarly. We're going to have it look very similar. And then we want it to hit their inbox at like almost the same time. It's like, instead of walking out of your office and seeing 6 people standing in line waiting to talk to you, you open your email and find a line of 6 people. So you like literally want them to come through within the same minute. So they're not interspersed with other communications, just like, straight down in that. So I think that there are some opportunities for doing some coordination in that way. I'm a big fan, and some people are going to think this is crazy, I'm a big fan of celebrating the wins that are appropriate. There's some stuff in some of these bills that have come through, and, even if you oppose the legislator and you oppose the people that got it through and you oppose the concept in general, if you can cherry pick something positive from it and give a shout out, you're going to shock your friends on Twitter. But that stuff gets noticed. And I personally take people a lot more seriously when may only be 1 out of 20 times, but 1 out of 20 times they say thank you, because it shows me that they're being deliberative and they're not just judging me based on who I am or the letter next to my name. So because we have more time, you're not spending the time driving to Frankfurt and back. That could be, that's 3 hours if you're in Northern Kentucky that you save. It may take you 3 hours to find something you like, but find that thing, like it, celebrate people for doing the work that you want them to do. And then know that that's a very positive thing as well. And maybe, that could almost kind of trend, so to speak, in your group. Because I assume that your advocacy group is a pretty, well-knit, if not tight-knit group. And so kind of establishing these new cultures. And I think that those pay large dividends all the time. So that's another one of those, like, the pandemic's giving us an opportunity to develop new habits.
Yeah.
And, I think it begs the question, are we wasting our time putting 6 people in a group and going into a legislator's office where one person gets to speak and you get 15 minutes and the legislator's sitting there, on, not always, but sometimes on their phone, or they're just busy. They're just very, very busy people. Would it be better to have 5 people sitting out in the hall, sending out messages, and the one person in there saying, I got 5 people in the hall, but I'm going to do you a favor and not bring them in. You and I are going to have a conversation. I'm going to report out to them. The next legislator we go to, next person in line is going to talk to them. I'm going to sit out in the columns, send some messages out. what, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a great example of a new habit that we could develop, but things like that, so that when next year comes, we're not just kind of falling back into those habits. And then one last thing I'd say, but, assuming that this legislative session is going to do what it's going to do, is thinking about the summer and when COVID's going to start to abate, whether that's the safety of the legislators, the safety of yourself, kind of, system-wide changes. I fully intend to set some calendar reminders for June 1 and July 1st. Those calendar reminders are going to say, reach out to my legislators about this, this, and this. And those are the things that I always forget. I always lose in the noise and the excitement of the session. But because I'm living my life so much on my computer right now, I can actually remember to do that. I should set it as an annual reminder, to be honest with you, and just go in and change and edit what issues I'm talking about. But legislators tend to be very happy to talk in June, July, and August.
Yeah.
Once you start getting near December, their time gets in very, very high demand. And then once you hit January, not only is their time just crazy in demand, but the likelihood of moving the needle on anything is very, very small. So, there's an efficiency side as well to that.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of people forget is that the standing committees continue to meet throughout the year. They have monthly meetings, and you can go to the Legislative Research Commission website, the Kentucky LRC, and you can find out when those committee meetings are. And like you said, as COVID starts abating and we start getting vaccinations into larger numbers, it's going to be easier to attend, and you start building a relationship with your representative. You're communicating with them on a regular basis when they have more time to talk. You're attending committee meetings, whether it's in person or virtually. Most of those committee meetings are broadcast by KET on their website. You can go to the KET website or the KET app, and they broadcast those committee meetings. But as you do that throughout the year, you create that relationship, and they get to know you. And I really loved what you said about, take time to find something that you have common ground and you can thank them for, or say, hey, while I may disagree with you on a lot of things, I really appreciate your position on this, or I wanted to thank you for voting for this piece of legislation. Little things.
Well, and if you can't do that, then I'd say find the social media engagement that has nothing to do with policy. It's the one where they're taking a picture and they're like, man, the Capitol's beautiful, but I hate the snow. And then, you retweet it, so to speak, and you're like, I hate the snow too. Hashtag bipartisanship, that kind of laugh out of people. And it shows that they're human. They want to be human. So there really is even a level below policy agreement that you can find common denominator. We all got to eat. We all want to drink coffee in the morning, beer in the afternoon, if you're meeting with me. So what they want to do that kind of stuff too. They like French fries, and it sounds silly, but humanizing, or I should say dehumanizing our elected officials is really problematic for
people are intimidated too. They don't think that they think they're wasting their legislators' time, and that's their time, so they should use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, sometimes what I'll do when I meet with legislators is I will purposely try to get out of their office in 11 minutes or less, because they do 15-minute increments. And I tell them, I want you to have more time. I know that you've got emails piling up. I know you're probably wanting to shove that peanut butter sandwich in your face. I'm going to give you that time. I'm going to walk out right now. And my strategy behind that is that I think that I'll be more memorable if I do something
bring
like
cookies. That works.
Yeah. Even better, bring them something and say here you go. And there's
kids work.
And they could say something on them, right? Support teachers, and you're like, okay. And they're delicious. But I think there's something too, you got to ask yourself, how are you gonna set yourself apart and be taken seriously? And that's just true in life. But it's certainly true when you're trying to get policies passed. So I think that's those are, just ideas. And again, having a meeting right now and starting to plan for January 2022 could actually be really exciting. I don't know about y'all, but I love the idea of planning beyond the pandemic. I bought some plane tickets for like early next fall. It was the greatest thing I've done. And it's still like 6 months. I told my wife, I said, we have almost as long to go as we have spent in lockdown so far.
But you have a goal. You have something to look forward to. That's it.
And I think we can do that in terms of advocacy. I think we really can. And the reality is, if you start thinking about January 2022, your timeline of action will include everything from here to there. And so it'll be, things become a lot more natural. Whereas when the session's on, it's like, if we're not bringing 150 people, then we're not going to be effective. Well, to be clear, you may not be effective with 1,500 people. But then the energy that goes into coordinating other people, that's hard, man. That is hard. If you could take some time and try to convince the legislator, just through rationality that your position is right. I mean, isn't that better anyway? And every time I meet with a legislator off session, I always say kind of ad nauseum, like, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you? What can I do to help you? And rarely do they take me up on it, but you can see there's kind of a consistency in my approach. And maybe that's born out of the fact that, people contact me in Bellevue that their trash didn't get picked up, but nobody's ever sent me a message like, my trash has been picked up all week and it's just really amazing. Man,
you're not going to get it.
Fortunately, plowing streets, we get there because Bellevue has the cleanest streets in Northern Kentucky. Greater Cincinnati, you mark my words.
I have to say, I just moved to Bellevue a few months ago, and I have to say the streets are in great shape. I mean, they're some of the cleanest streets that I've seen around, and the snow hits, man, and those plows are right on it. So it's really good. Yeah,
it's as long as your hillside's not slipping, you're doing great.
Yeah, well,
you guys leave your houses?
I'm down by the river. And I'm looking forward to those post-COVID days when I can stop by and have a beer with you on your porch. So
absolutely, I've seen we've stood and talked, with you on the sidewalk and me on the porch. But yes, there will be a standing invitation to come on up, and even just not being 20 degrees outside, it'll get us a lot closer.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you being here this week with us.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Always great to talk to you.
Yeah, this is fun, and y'all reach out and feel free to share my contact information with your people. I can just Salzman R1 SALZMAN R1 at nku.edu. Anybody who's listening wants to keep the conversation going or send me a question or is interested in getting a political science degree from NKU.
I've got half of one.
Hey, there you go.
I really do. So, maybe I'll have to take a couple of your classes.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yep. Okay, sounds great. Thanks again. You take care, and we'll put your contact information on the information for the podcast. So if you want to get a hold of Ryan and tell him what a great job he's doing on getting the trash picked up every week.
That's right. Good job.
I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
No problem. Stay safe.
That's going to wrap it up for this week on Left in Kentucky. We appreciate Ryan being with us. Always good to have him on.
I love having Ryan around. It's great.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. Very interesting to talk to. Let's see. Coming up next week, we've got Celis Wilder, who is a political activist here in Kentucky. And he'll be talking to us about several politically active organizations throughout Kentucky and his thoughts on the General Assembly. So we look forward to that.
Yes, and guys, don't forget the reorg is coming up for the Democratic Party here in Kentucky. And that's going to be kicking off in the middle of March. We're going to have an episode about that around that time. And in the meantime, you can go KDP's website and get some information there.
Excellent. We'll put the link to the KDP website and the information for the podcast. And we've got some really good episodes lined up in the near future. We're going to be talking to Citizens Climate Lobby, and we have representatives from Planned Parenthood who will be with us. And Yeah, really trying to cook up something special for April Fool's episode. So stay tuned for that.
I have some ideas.
Oh, cool.
It's a surprise for you guys, though.
In the meantime, this is Roberto Henriquez.
Amy Ferguson.
Left in Kentucky, the podcast of indivisible Northern Kentucky.